So in my last video, I briefly touched on something that Elon said on Lex Fridman's podcast. If you're not familiar with Lex, he's kind of like if Joe Rogan had a baby with a koala. Of course, a koala would never commingle with Joe because remember, that koala already has chlamydia. If it catches what Joe's got too, it might die. Anyway, Lex is just a fun little guy who agrees with everyone he has on, eats some eucalyptus, and then takes a nap. And that's all you need to know about him. In this episode, he poses a question to Elon, which is,
what do you think it takes for the American empire to not collapse in the near-term future, in the next 100 years?
Elon doesn't answer, really. Instead, he starts talking about the end of the American empire and Western civilization in general. He seems to anticipate some sort of baby-pocalypse.
It's the birthright. My counterintuitive thing happens when civilizations are winning for too long. The birth rate declines.
And look, I know declining birth rates might pose a serious problem. We can talk about it, but considering everything we're about to get into, you'll forgive me if I do not take Elon seriously about this issue. Get off my ass, natalists! See, Elon has a history of obsession with making babies.
Is Elon Musk planning to father a legion of super babies?
And this obsession pervades his private life and his public life and his political worldview. And I'm not gonna call it a fetish. But now you'll often hear it said about Elon that when you finally hear him talk about something that you specifically happen to know about, you realize he's kind of a dumbass. Software engineers will tell you this, engineers will tell you this, but I counsel delinquent turtles for a living, so I don't really know about any of that stuff. This is what I was waiting for.
You can go and look at the same thing happening in ancient Rome.
I'm one of those Rome weirdos. See, Elon allegedly loves history, and in particular ancient Rome. I mean, he said he thinks about the empire every day. He changed his Twitter handle to Cecius Maximus as part of his eternal quest to win the approval of teenagers on 4chan. He loves it. So surely he knows a little bit about it, right? No. Hearing Elon talk about Rome was incredibly frustrating, but there wasn't really any room to talk about it in my Grok video, so I resorted to a snide and frankly bitchy gag about him tripping over his words. Here that is.
The birth rate declines. Rome fell because the Romans stopped making Romans.
And you know, everyone misspeaks sometimes. What you just witnessed there was misdirected passive aggression on my part. So to rectify that, this video is going to be appropriately directed active aggression. So let's take a look at this truly awful Roman history lesson and try and figure out what's wrong with it, then try and figure out what's true. Some of the stuff might seem petty at first, but stick with me. It gets fantastically stupid.
Julius Caesar took note of this, I think around 50-ish BC. And tried to pass, I don't know if he was successful, tried to pass a law to give an incentive for any Roman citizen that would have a third child.
Okay, so in 50 BC, everyone's favorite balding, mass-murdering populist cuckold, Julius Caesar, is not in Rome. He's away in a place the Romans called Gaul, around modern-day France. Fortunately for Caesar, it would still be hundreds of years before a man named Clovis invented the French, so instead he's there to fight Celts. Which is not to say he couldn't have introduced legislation. He is still a senator, he does have agents in Rome. However, at this time he's in kind of a cold war with the rest of the Senate. They want him to disband his legions and come back to Rome as a private citizen so they can prosecute him, basically for war crimes, and he does not want to do that. And no one knows why. In fact, he doesn't want to do that so bad that early the next year he takes a legion, marches on Rome, and initiates a very bloody civil war. Now, Elon did say 50 BC-ish, so I'm not really ragging on him too much for this, but I love the idea of during this period of just palpable tension, the noose getting tighter every single day, Caesar sends a guy to the Senate to go like, hey y'all, I know that things are like pretty crazy right now, but like have y'all noticed there's like less babies around? Now, after marching on Rome, Caesar did implement several sweeping reforms, and it seems like Elon is kind of maybe referring to one of them. Now, there's no mention of a third child incentive. The sources aren't that specific. Instead, it's just rewards for large families. This is from Cassius Dio, pictured here. But it's possible Elon's just confusing this with later Augustan marriage and family reforms, so again, no big deal, not trying to be an asshole about this. Instead, I'm interested in something that Dio, pictured here, says slightly higher higher up the page. See, Elon says that Julius Caesar was acknowledging an impending population crisis due to low birth rates.
Julius Caesar took note of this.
He wants us to believe that Caesar shares his breeder kink. Oh, sorry, I can't say that. He wants us to believe that Caesar shares his breeder hobby. But it says right in the goddamn text why Caesar did this, not to combat a trend of historically low birth rates, but due to a serious falling off of population on account of the multitudes of those who had perished. He was trying to replace Romans who had been stabbed, because Romans of this period could not stop getting stabbed. There was all the guys who got stabbed by Celts and Germans. There was all the guys who got stabbed by other Romans in a recent civil war. There was all the guys who got stabbed by the guy who won that civil war because he was depressed the war was over and he wanted to keep stabbing. There was a fuckzillion politicians who were always getting stabbed around this period just to keep things lively. There was Caesar himself who didn't know for sure he was going to get stabbed but could probably guess based on the law of averages. And my personal favorite stabbing victim, Publius Clodius Pulcher, who broke new ground by surviving getting stabbed, only to get killed a short while later by, if you can believe it, getting stabbed again. Look, I'm not saying it's impossible that Caesar was concerned about low birth rates. In fact, it's entirely plausible, but it's not in the sources. I think it's more likely that he was concerned with the decades-long clusterfuck of guys getting stabbed. Furthermore, we don't really know that Caesar did this at all. I mean, he may have. We know that Augustus did something similar about 25 years later, and modern scholarship suggests that he may have been expanding on Caesar's policies, but that's speculation. Remember when I said this about 5 seconds ago? But it's not in the sources. 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 I was lying. That was a trick. What I should have said is it's not in the source. We have one sentence from one source. Dio, pictured here, who was born about 200 years after Caesar's death, and what we have of his work is fragmented and full of verifiable inaccuracies. So safe to say, Elon's got this all fucked up, didn't happen in 50 BC, there's no mention of any third child incentive, we don't know for sure that anything happened at all, and if we are to trust our one source, this policy was aimed at replacing about 100 billion stab victims, not stopping some winning too long population decline due to low birth rate attrition.
It really is that simple.
Hey, fuck off, I'm talking. Now, I want to be fair to Elon. I mean, ideally, if you talk about something on a podcast, you get your facts right, but I misremember things I've read all the time. It's a mistake anyone can make at least one.
I think it was around 50 BC.
No.
The Rome
No, it can't be.
a bill to give a bonus
No.
to any Roman
No.
citizen that would have a third
No.
child.
Oh my
Julius
God,
Caesar
don't
tried to
say
pass,
it. Don't say it, you
laws like
bastard.
50 BC
Don't
or
say
something
no.
like that to
No.
give an
Fuck.
incentive for any
God
Roman
damn
citizen
it.
that would have this
God
type of-
damn it! Let's move on.
And I think Augustus was able to, well, he was, the dictator, so this Senate was just for show. I think he did pass a tax incentive for Roman citizens to have a third child.
Okay, there's much clearer evidence for what Elon's talking about here. We're finally getting our first corroborated example of someone incentivizing large families in ancient Rome. We got multiple sources. We got Suetonius. We got Justinian's Digest. We got our old friend Dio, pictured here. Good job, Elon. Here, having a whole entire adult-sized chicken nuggets. I'm proud of you. Or am I? No. Give me back those nugs, you son of a bitch! Now, to understand why this is not good supporting evidence for Elon's birth rate theory, we first have to take a gander at Augustus's motivations and the actual substance of the laws. Oh shit. It's Augustus's motivations and the actual substance of the laws. That's right. It's time for everyone's favorite segment. I know this part does not sound like it's gonna be fun, but let me tell you. Oh boy. Firstly, just to get this out of the way, Augustus was not just dangling a tax break carrot to incentivize larger families. He was also wielding a big-ass stick. Unmarried, childless Romans could be fined, they could be denied offices and honors in a society that was absolutely obsessed with offices and honors, and most hilariously, they could be hit with inheritance restrictions, which means the government would sometimes just take their shit. Imagine a young Roman noble who, like many of the time, just wants to live the single life, date Rome's most eligible bachelorettes, and or married women, maybe visit the brothels at night, and then one day he gets the news that his parents have been tragically, yet predictably, stabbed. The government might just go like, oh, you wanted that whole estate? And all those denarii? Should've got married, bitch. You can think about that while we slice your childhood home in half and take our bit away in a U-Haul. Like, imagine if your government punished you because women didn't like you. Yeah, I need an assault unit on Tim. His date canceled while he was getting ready, and now he's in his garage painting miniatures. That is a highly inaccurate joke I just made. Most Roman women had very little choice about who they married, but I thought it was funny, so I said it. Could've just pulled an Elon and presented it as fact because I want it to be true. I'm my own source. Fuck you, Dio. Pictured here. Meanwhile, if you got married and had kids, you could expect the opposite of all that. Keep your assets in the family, elevate your social standing, ascend to higher office, maybe, a whole slew of extra rights for women, and yes, a tax incentive. But hold on. Many of these provisions fall under an umbrella provision called Jus Trium Liberorum, which means the right of 3 children. It's a third child incentive. Bury this man in nuts and then take him away again. Because remember, Elon is not just telling us a fun little story about Caesar and Augustus. He's using these examples to try and make a point about why civilizations fail. And this is where my complaints go from nitpicky to nit serious. Our friend Dio, pictured here, gives us a very clear motivation for Caesar's alleged law, but that's just one sentence and one source. There's not that much we can say about it. Augustus's laws are much better documented, and they defy Elon's theory in a number of ways, some nuanced, and one so glaringly fucking stupid that if you're a fan of ancient history at all, you probably already noticed it. The last grain of truth in what Elon's saying here is this. It does seem like these laws were aimed at least partially at increasing the number of Roman citizens. However, for the plebeians, the common people, again, it seems like Augustus's major concern was replacing the mega landfill of dead Romans with pointy objects sticking out of them. Between the reigns of Caesar and Augustus, there has been another civil war. Augustus knows all about it. He won it. Well, another guy won it for him while he watched, which is also cool. Still, there was some concern about low birth rates. What Elon doesn't tell you is that this concern was aimed at a tiny percentage of Roman citizens, the nobles, the senatorial class, and the equestrians, a Latin word meaning scary horse girls. I'm kidding. If the senators were like royalty, the equestrians were like knights. Historians love it when you make ill-fitting comparisons to feudalism. Actually, equestrian is often translated as knight, but I find that confusing because they weren't really the same thing as medieval knights. Historians love it when you call things medieval. To quote James A. Field's very dense text on the subject, it must be steadily borne in mind that Augustus's legislation was primarily eugenicist legislation, and only secondarily populationist. Other historians shy away from the eugenicist thing, instead stressing Augustus's moral motivations. I don't see why both can't be true. You can view this as a ruler's attempt to shore up the ruling class, and also as a conservative man's attempt to stamp out what he viewed as increasingly lax and liberal attitudes towards sex and marriage and family. The idea that these were moral laws intended to take the empire back to a golden age of Roman virtue that probably never even existed is very consistent with Augustus's character. In his own words, "With new laws enacted on my initiative, I have restored many exemplary practices of our forefathers, which in our age were rapidly lapsing into oblivion." So consider this. These laws also criminalized adultery, and it was under their terms that Augustus exiled his own daughter to an island prison for allegedly cheating on her husband, future emperor and rumored pervert Tiberius. It's probably not even true, but there's a story about Tiberius that is so disgusting I will not relay it to you. In fact, Googling it is one of the great regrets of my life. I think I'm on a registry now. And despite multiple instances of the Roman people being like, "Oh, come on, she's learned her lesson, bring her back now," Augustus never conceded. She never saw Rome again. What does that tell you about where Augustus's head was at? We can also better understand the cultural impetus for these laws by looking at what happened when they went into effect. The Roman elites, what do the kids say? Crashed out. I'm relevant. I am. 34 isn't even that old. I'm not even that fat. So shut up. It's a few days later now, and I am sick. That's why I put on this nice flower shirt. It's what I want to be buried in. The Roman elites absolutely hated these laws, and some went to truly degenerate lengths to circumvent them. Multiple sources mention men betrothing themselves to children. Suetonius says immature girls. Dio, pictured here, you know what, that bit's done now. I don't like that bit anymore. Dio straight up says they were getting engaged to babies, something that is seemingly confirmed in Justinian's Digest. They were getting engaged to babies. What in the Jacob Black is that?
You imprinted on my daughter?
It wasn't my choice.
She's a baby!
Why would they do such a thing, I hear you ask? Were they just sick fucks like Stephanie Meyer? Yes! I mean, no, it's for another reason. See, for a time, betrothal counted as marriage on paper, meaning that young men could avoid the harshest penalties for perennial bachelors by having very long engagements. And since the minimum marriageable age was 12, a man who got engaged to, say, a 2-year-old could then go on living a single lifestyle for another 10 years without any social or legal pressure to just get married already. Also, divorce was pretty easy, so sometimes people avoided penalties by staying married just long enough to declare it during relevant legal proceedings. Dearest Camilla, my parents have just been tragically, yet predictably stabbed, and I stand to inherit everything. Would you do me the very great honor of being my wife from 3 to 5 p.m. this Thursday? That's a joke, but I'm not even sure if I'm exaggerating. There is actual mention of people getting married and then divorced later the same day. Also, remember, Romans were Italian, so they wouldn't have talked like that. It would be more like, "Oh, dearest Camilla, your hair is like a waterfall of a spaghetti." Forget that bit. That never happened. People adopted children in the same cynical way for the same cynical purposes. Imagine adopting a child just long enough to claim a dependent on your taxes. And a final point, which I feel pretty well proves that Augustus was not all that concerned about an empire-wide dearth of babies. Hang on, I can never remember if dearth means a shortage or an abundance. The fuck? The fuck? Hang on. Okay, yeah, dearth. These laws only reward having children who by their letter are considered legitimate, and they also place quite a few restrictions on who can marry who, which would of course have a slowing effect on birth rates. Allow me to now read you the most fun bit of 2,000-year-old legal code you have ever heard. It is provided by the Julian laws that a senator or his son or grandson or blah 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 shall not knowingly or with malicious intent become betrothed to or marry a woman whose father or mother practices or has practiced the profession of an actor. So in the fairly strict system of Roman social caste, jobs that were considered low and dirty included things like handling dead flesh, whoring, and acting. Oh, you're trying to marry that hot, sexy Roman senator? Jack Quaid? The fuck you are. You're gonna marry Dakota Johnson whether you like it or not. Hail Caesar, asshole. Keep your morals, kids. Don't marry into acting families. So hopefully I've now thoroughly demonstrated that Augustus was not so much concerned with Romans making Romans, but the right kinds of Romans making more of those kinds of Romans. Which doesn't fit very neatly into Elon's theory about how Rome fell because there weren't enough breeder fetishists. But putting all that aside, there is another reason that none of these laws lend themselves to Elon's point. Any ancient history fans out there notice the dates we are dealing with here? These laws were enacted in 18 BC and 9 AD respectively. The Western Roman Empire would not totally collapse until like 500 fucking years later. The Roman population peaked way after Augustus was dead. In fact, in 50 BC-ish, the Roman Empire proper did not even fucking exist yet. These were the last days of the Republic. Augustus was the very first Roman emperor. You guys don't freak out. Don't freak out, stay calm. But I think I may have noticed a flaw in Elon's theory. In summary, to prove that the Roman Empire fell due to low birth rates, Elon first cites a law which may or may not have existed from before the empire proper, and then laws which were passed in like the first 5 minutes after the empire came online. These laws had multiple practical and cultural motivations, none of which lead me to believe that Caesar or Augustus were trying to stop a civilization-ending baby shortage. Elon then invokes some dark winning too long magic, and a mere half a millennium later, civilization over, I guess.
It really is that simple.
Hey, fuck off, I'm talking. All right, now it's time to try and answer the question we came here to answer. Did Rome fall due to low birth rates?
Prosperity destroys the birth rate.
An extended period of prosperity seems to cause birth rates to plummet.
The Romans weren't making Romans.
Rome fell because the Romans stopped making Romans.
So I have an issue with Elon's theory here, which is that he keeps talking about ancient Roman demography as though it's some sort of solved problem, when in fact it is anything but. When Elon says, at this point birth rates were at an all-time high, but over here they bottomed out, he is talking out of his shiny billionaire ass. There was no empire-wide birth rate statistic. We're trying to extrapolate census data, which was way less specific. Rome was an enormous multicultural empire with constantly shifting borders, and not even the Romans seem to really be clear on who counted as Roman. We can surmise that at several points in Roman history, its birth rates probably were far below replacement levels, but that's usually because the death rates were so shockingly high that to keep up, Roman women would have to be given birth with the urgency of a fucking machine gun. Regardless, it does seem like in the late empire, the family unit began to shrink. I would never argue that birth rates were a complete non-factor in the fall of Rome, just as I wouldn't argue that declining birth rates in modern developed nations are a non-issue. But the difference between me and Elon, aside from the fact that I'm 7'5" with the body of a Greek god, is that when I see something happen in the world, I assume that it was in fact caused by something else. So that's where we've arrived now. The concept of cause and effect. Hey Elon, tell you what, come by my place tomorrow, we'll brush up on object permanence next. So if and when Rome had a fertility problem, what were its tangible causes? Could have been all sorts of shit. Here's some good candidates: extremely high infant mortality rates, extremely high maternal mortality rates. I read a paper that argued very convincingly that some Roman men had sterility issues due to frequently taking lava-hot baths. And hey, how about lead poisoning? Social upheaval, constant wars, economic problems, maybe a general sense of uncertainty and fear, and for sure the rise of Christianity and an attendant culture of celibacy, but nothing so utterly amorphous and nondescript as winning too long. Now, I guess actually in 18 BC, Rome had been winning too long. It had just won a bunch of wars against itself. Here's something Elon somehow hasn't considered. What if instead of low birth rates precipitating the fall of the empire caused birth rates to decline? Could be the empire was falling for a long-ass time. Elon thinks he's noticed a global correlation between prosperity and declining birth rates, but he's just so uncurious about, one, if that's actually true, and two, if so, why? It's just, yo, this is crazy. Rome was winning too long and all the babies got evaporated in the sun. You know, this is a lesson we can all learn from.
It really is that.
Hey, fuck off, I'm talking. So where is Elon getting this from? Why does he believe it? Well, he actually does cite one source. Good job, Elon. I'm proud of you. No.
The single biggest thing that is often actually not mentioned in history books, but Durant does mention it.
Durant. Okay, great. Elon is referring to Will Durant's 1944 volume Caesar and Christ, a book I have read and enjoyed. I mean, it's outdated, but that's to be expected of any 80-year-old history. And listening to Elon, I got very annoyed on Will Durant's behalf. Like, if you didn't know better, you might think that Durant says that Rome fell due to an anti-baby prosperity curse. See, like a thinking, curious person with a respect for history, Durant actually examines the causes of what he calls family limitation. And would you be shocked to learn that the words winning too long are not to be found in that section? In fact, one of the main reasons he cites for family limitation is infanticide due to rising poverty. And because Durant is not a breeder fetishist, allegedly, he also discusses a number of other reasons that Rome fell. Here he summarizes the broad causes, and low birth rates are not mentioned at all. The essential causes of Rome's decline lay in her people, her morals, her class struggle, her failing trade, her bureaucratic despotism, her stifling taxes, her consuming wars. Take out the vague word morals, and I think that's a summary a lot of modern historians would find fairly agreeable. I want to know what Elon even means by prosperity. Or as they say in academic history, winning too long. Does he mean birth rates declined when Rome's borders expanded? Because that would be weird. Does he mean when Rome was flush with cash? Okay, why? He does at one point say when Rome had no external enemies. Quick question, Elon. When the fuck was that? We're talking about one of the most warlike nations in the history of humankind. Hey, Publius, did you hear the news? Yeah, Rome has no external enemies. The birth rate's declining. Oh, what's that? Oh, we're at war with Parthia again? Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Hey honey, we're back at war with Parthia. You can give birth now. Regardless, per Durant and about 1 billion other historians, there are a lot of ways you could characterize Rome as being the opposite of prosperous during the only period of time Elon actually specifies, which is between the end of the Third Punic War and 50 BC.
When they were fighting the Carthaginians and Rome's very life was at stake, birth rates were all-time high. After they defeated Carthage and ruled the Mediterranean, the birth rates plummeted. and to such a degree that Julius Caesar even tried to pass laws like in 50 BC or something like that.
Yes, that extended period of prosperity leading up to 50 BC and Julius Caesar, a man who could think back to his youth and remember a magical time when you could go down to the Forum and see the beautiful faces of a great multitude of Rome's finest nobles all up on the rostra, due to the fact that their severed heads were impaled there on sticks. I don't actually know if it was technically on sticks. Jesus Christ, trying to be accurate is exhausting. I can see why Elon went the other route. Anyway, we're talking about a period of enormous wealth disparity, dangerous political divisions, endless assassinations, no fewer than 8 external wars, and 1 devastating civil war. So why did the prosperity magic come for the babies, Elon? Okay, what we have here is a man speaking with confidence about something he clearly knows almost nothing about. And it's not just the made-up statistics, it's little things. Like, I gave him a pass earlier for saying 50 BC, but the more I think about it, the more I feel that anyone who cares about this history would not make that mistake. It's one of the most critical years of Julius Caesar's life, and one of the most famous moments in the story. Also this.
And I think Augustus was able to, well, he was, the dictator, so.
When discussing any other culture, dictator just means absolute ruler. However, when discussing ancient Rome, it means something very specific. It is a title and an office. Now, Augustus was essentially an absolute ruler, which is what Elon means here. However, again, I feel that someone who knew the story well would not use this language. Elon says that he doesn't know if Julius Caesar passed his law, but that surely Augustus did because he was a dictator. Now, Augustus famously declined the title of dictator. You know who was a dictator? Julius fucking Caesar. So why does someone who seems to know nothing but a few names and vague details keep repeating this fiction? Why does he believe it? Well, you probably couldn't tell, but I'm actually not a historian nor an academic of any kind, so I'm allowed to say this. Here's my opinion. I think Elon's taking his own weird priorities and projecting them back onto the past, and I call his priorities weird not because population decline is a non-issue, but because 1, I'm pretty sure there's a racial element to this with him. 2, he doesn't care about this issue enough to, look into it for a second. And 3, I'm only half joking about the breeder fetishist stuff.
Legion of super babies?
Legion of super babies? Legion of super babies?
This guy has a ton of kids despite being a terrible father by most accounts, including the accounts of his kids. If Elon was living in 18 BC, he would have been run out of Rome by Augustus himself. And then they'd take all his kids and they'd conscript them into the military, where they would form a legion. Chief Arminius, the Romans approach. It appears to be some sort of legion of super babies. Projecting what you see in the world around you onto the past and then trying to identify a lesson or a pattern from it is the favorite pastime of people who kinda like history but not enough to read about it. Even I do it, but because I'm capable of feeling shame, I express these ideas from the privacy of my own closet, crouched under a blanket while on the phone with the ghost of Helen Keller. I think it's pretty clear that's what's happening here with Elon. I mean, this is a baby-obsessed man trying to retrofit the past with his obsession. He doesn't just say ancient Rome fell due to low birth rates.
That was also true of really basically every civilization throughout history.
He says that every civilization throughout history fell due to low birth rates. Oh God. Oh God, I'd like to have the part of my brain that processes language removed. Looks like I'm probably gonna survive my illness, so I've put this shirt back on now. Yeah, I call this my shirt for the living. We all have one. This is called ideological revisionism. While contrary to its reputation, regular run-of-the-mill revisionism is not inherently bad. Ideological revisionism is. It's not revising our understanding of the past based on new information, but based on present-day activism, and it's basically always bullshit. You see, Lex, the fall of... Hey, wake up! Thank you. The fall of Rome really wasn't that...
It really is that simple.
Hey, fuck off. Wait. No, it wasn't. It was extraordinarily complicated. The most studied historians of this weird and twisted and wonderful story will never completely get their heads around it. And that is what makes our communal, unending effort to understand it anyway such a noble endeavor. We should treat the present day with the same reverence. If Elon really cared about declining birth rates in the present day, he could do a lot to correct that trend, but first he'd have to think about it for a second. He'd have to think about it the way a real historian thinks about the past. It's a problem secondary to a bunch of other problems. It has tangible causes, not winning too long, not prosperity. Sure, wealthier nations tend to provide easier access to contraception and education, but is he really arguing that we should limit access to those things? honestly, maybe he's fucking weird. But if not, how about we address the fact that children are fast becoming prohibitively expensive for a huge number of people? How about we in the US expand benefits for parents just to find some rough parity with those of other developed nations? How about we put more resources into medical care and medical research aimed at preserving the lives of mothers and babies? Or how about we try to pay influencers to be brood cows? That's probably a better plan. Elon, broski, look, take some advice from a turtle psychologist and learn to love history whether or not it agrees with your weird shit. It's way more fun that way. Furthermore, I'd like to ask that all the neo-Nazis please leave Rome alone. You are making this shit uncomfortable for the rest of us. Lastly, Lex, I'd like to suggest a name change for your podcast if that's not too presumptuous. Instead of the Lex Fridman podcast, I think a better name would be The Sleepy Agreeer with Lex Fridman. I think it has a real ring to it. This is Neon Sharp signing off. Y'all be safe out there, and remember what I always say: to err is human, to procreate is... I can't even finish saying it. Fuck this. Hey, subscribe to the channel. It's a good channel in my opinion. But look, don't do it for me. Do it for Imperator Caesar Divi Filius Augustus. He is humbly commanding you to subscribe to the channel and to like the video. Thanks for watching, y'all.